The first thing I heard was the click. Metal, precise, rhythmic. A man somewhere in the dark corner of the archive room was opening and closing a lighter with the kind of patience that made everyone else nervous. I knew that without looking. I knew it because the city clerk sweating beside me had stopped breathing normally 4 clicks ago, and because the 2 men guarding the only door had gone so still they did not look human anymore. I kept my hands flat on the steel table. You told the same story to internal affairs, a prosecutor, a hospital psychiatrist, and one very stupid reporter, said the man across from me. He wore a charcoal suit, a narrow tie, and the expression of someone personally offended by oxygen. At some point, Miss Belly, repetition becomes performance. My story didn't change. That is not the point. It is exactly the point. His jaw moved once. The click came again. I looked toward the sound before I could stop myself. He stood near the records shelves with one shoulder against shadow, dressed in black so severe it made the room look cheaper. Tall. Still. Dark hair cut close. No wasted motion. In one hand, a silver lighter. In the other, my file. I knew who Dante Salvator was the way everyone in Chicago knew the weather before it broke. Not from direct experience, from pressure in the air. Nobody had told me he would come himself. Look at me when you answer, the man across the table snapped. I looked back at him. I saw my father killed. His laugh was small and mean. And then, you survived a fire at a safe house that doesn't exist, under a name that appears nowhere in state records. With men you cannot identify except as one of them had a gold ring shaped like a lion. Do I have the fairy tale right? My throat worked. I hated that it did. Across the room, Dante Salvator opened my file. Click, I saw the dog-eared corner immediately. Page 6 folded under. Again, they always folded that page. I stood up before fear could argue with me. One guard moved. Dante lifted 2 fingers without looking, and the guard stopped. I crossed to him on legs that should have failed and didn't. When I was close enough to smell cold air on his coat and something darker under it, cedar, smoke, night, I reached for the file. Every man in the room stiffened. Dante let me touch it. My fingertips found the damaged corner. I straightened it carefully, aligning the stack the way I always aligned damaged records before I repaired them. The gesture lived in my body deeper than prayer. The page trembled once under my hand, not with fear, with anger. Read the page they kept folding under, I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. Not weak, just stripped clean. His gaze settled on my face. People always noticed his eyes first because they were the kind of dark that made other colors feel theatrical. I noticed his stillness, the awful discipline of it. Why? He asked. Because it mentions Saint or Sola. Because that was real. Because if one thing on the page is true, then the rest of me is not madness. But what I said was, because lies move around. Records don't. Something changed in his face, not softness, nothing that generous, just attention sharpened to a point. He looked down and turned the page. The room went silent enough that I could hear the fluorescent hum above us. Name, Serafina Belli. Original intake, Saint Orsola Children's Home. Transfer authorized by V. Salvator. Dante froze. He did not blink. The lighter stopped moving in his hand. For the first time since I had walked in, there was no click. The man at the table stood abruptly. Boss, out, Dante said, one word. No volume, no effort. The room emptied like somebody had pulled a drain. I stayed where I was because my knees had become theoretical. Dante read the page once, then again. His thumb rested beside the intake stamp as if the ink itself had burned him. You know what that means, I whispered. He looked up at me slowly. Yes, he said. My heart crashed against my ribs. Then tell them. Not here, I laughed once. I did not mean to, it sounded frayed. That's convenient. His gaze dropped to my hands. To the way I was still holding the file together at the edges to keep the weakened spine from splitting wider. Nobody had ever noticed that before. You repair paper, he said. I restored damaged records, and they called you a liar. Yes. His mouth did not soften, but something in it hardened against the room, not against me. It was worse somehow, more protective. More dangerous. You should have begged, he said. I stared at him. Would that have helped? No, he closed the file. But most people do. I did not know then that this was the first thing about me he would return to when he was tired, furious, half-bleeding, or already lost. Not my face, not my voice. The fact that I had protected a page before I protected myself. The guard returned. Car's ready, car. I stepped back. I'm not going anywhere with you. Dante handed the file to the guard, then reached past me to switch off the archive lamp. His sleeve brushed my wrist. Heat, brief and impossible. The room dimmed around us. Yes, he said, you are little witness. The name landed cold between us. I should have run. Instead, I followed him into the corridor because for the first time in 3 years, someone had looked at the evidence and gone still. The elevator doors shut. One life ended there. The Salvetter estate did not look criminal from the outside. That was the first insult. It looked respectable in the most expensive possible way. Stone facade, iron gate, trimmed hedges, like wind touching the windows. Inside, it smelled faintly of espresso, furniture polish, and the kind of money that insulated itself from consequence. I stood in a guest suite bigger than my entire apartment and tried not to touch anything because it all looked inherited and dangerous. The bedroom door opened without warning. I turned, ready to fight someone with a silver hairbrush if necessary, and found a man balancing 2 garment bags, a grocery sack, and a face full of personal grievance. You're awake, he said. Excellent, I carried yogurt up 3 flights for nothing. I blinked. What? He set everything down on a velvet chair like he blamed the chair. Tommaso Greco. Security, logistics, emotional support when nobody appreciates my gifts. He was broad-shouldered, beautifully dressed, and wore the expression of a saint condemned to traffic forever. Boss says you need clothes. Teresa says you need food. I say nobody ever asks what I need. What do you need? He put one hand over his heart. Teresa Amato to acknowledge that grilled fish can be erotic. Before I could answer, a woman's voice called from the hall, It cannot. Tommaso closed his eyes in suffering. You hear that? Cruelty. Daily, Teresa entered carrying a tray. She was maybe 50, silver threaded through dark hair, apron immaculate, gaze surgical. She gave me tea, ignored Tommaso, and said, If he tells you he's dying, he means of boredom. He lies about me to civilians, he told the ceiling. You're not civilian anymore, Teresa said to me. The words hit harder than they should have. After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the tea. Am I a prisoner? Tommaso considered that. Officially, protected guest, emotionally. I'd say aggressively supervised. By Dante Salvetter, he crossed himself dramatically. Madonna help us, yes. I should not have smiled. I did anyway. His eyes narrowed in approval. Good. That's good. The house needs somebody who remembers smiling exists. The smile left as quickly as it came. What does he want from me? Tommaso's face shifted, not into fear, into caution. The truth, he said, which around here is inconvenient. A knock sounded once. Tommaso straightened immediately. Dante entered without waiting for permission. He had changed into a black shirt with the sleeves rolled once, and somehow that was more threatening than the suit had been. His presence changed the room's temperature. Teresa's tea cooled inside my hands. Tommaso moved toward the door. Stay, Dante said. That told me the conversation was for discipline, not seduction. I hated that I knew the distinction already. Dante looked at the untouched tray, then at me. You should eat. I'd rather leave. No, is that the whole conversation? If it needs to be. Anger steadied me better than fear. You took me from a public building. I removed you from men who buried your name once and were preparing to do it again. By locking me in a mansion. Yes. Tommaso glanced at the ceiling like. Maybe God handled impossible people by category. I put the tea down carefully. You knew what Saint Orsola was. Dante's gaze held mine. Yes, and your file should not exist. My heart tripped. That isn't an answer. It's the first one you get. I stood because sitting made me feel handled. If you know I'm telling the truth, then say it, publicly. His expression did not move. Public truth gets people killed faster than private truth. That sounds like something men tell themselves when they're cowards. Tommaso inhaled so sharply, I thought he might actually swallow his. Ty. Dante took one step closer. Not many men frightened me by approaching slowly. Most only frightened me when they were loud. Dante's danger lived in control, and that was worse. Much worse. Careful little witness. The nickname should have made me furious. Instead, my pulse did something small and humiliating. I'm tired of being careful, I said. A pause. Then very quietly, I know. For one terrible second, the room thinned around us. Then he broke the moment himself. You will remain here. Dr. Bianca Rizzo will evaluate you this afternoon. Teresa will get you anything you need. Tommaso will take you nowhere unless I approve it. I don't need a doctor. You haven't slept properly in 3 days, he said. Your left hand shakes when you're too cold. You keep pressing your thumb into the center of your palm to stop it. You can argue with me if you want. Don't bother arguing with facts. I looked at my hand. He was right. That angered me more than it should have. After he left, Tommaso exhaled like he had been underwater. Well, what? You called Dante Salvator a coward and remained alive. He considered me. I may have to revise several religious beliefs. I laughed once despite myself. Later, when the house had gone low and gold with evening, I stood at the window watching lake water go black. I did not know Dante was downstairs in his office, reading my file for a 3rd time. Dante Saint Orsola. The stamp had not faded in his memory. Neither had the heat, the smoke, or the child with ash on her face staring at him as if he had arrived too late, which he had. Serafina Belli had not begged. She had aligned the pages first. No one in his world protected truth before survival. That was why she was dangerous, and why he would not let anyone else touch her. Back upstairs, I heard the soft metallic click from somewhere below. His lighter. It sounded like a lock choosing its own door. Dr. Bianca Rizzo did not behave like a woman employed by violent men. She behaved like a woman who had long ago accepted that violent men bled just as stupidly as everyone else. She arrived in navy scrubs, set a medical bag on the sitting room table, and said, "If you tell me you're fine, I'll assume the opposite." I'm not. Fine, yes. Women say that right before they faint in hallways. She took my blood pressure, checked my pupils, asked about sleep, asked about medication. Asked about panic in a voice so dry it made the questions easier to survive. When I hesitated at Saint Orsola, she did not press, which made me trust her a little and resent her for it. At the end, she tucked her stethoscope away. You are not unstable. No one had said that so plainly in years. Something hot rose up my throat. You barely know me. I know trauma when I see it. Her face softened by 1/2 inch. And I know when men use a woman's fear as an administrative solution. I looked at the floor. She followed my gaze to the scar on my wrist. Thin, pale, old. You tried once, she asked. Not to die. I hated how honest that sounded. Just to stop thinking. Bianca nodded like I had handed her weather, not shame. That is still serious. The bedroom door opened. Luca Ferretti stepped in carrying a narrow metal case and a tablet. He looked younger than everyone else in the house, maybe 30, polished in a soft way that made people trust him too quickly. Sorry, he said. Boss asked me to bring this to Miss Belli. Bianca made a face. Of course he did. God forbid a patient gets through one afternoon without an errand. Luca smiled at me. Occupational hazard, he needs your expertise. I followed him to a smaller room at the back of the house that turned out to be a private records office. Shelves, locked cabinets, a scanning table. Humidity controls. It was obscene. It was beautiful. On the center worktable lay a charred ledger page under protective glass. I forgot to be angry for a full 5 seconds. You keep conservation tools in a Mafia mansion? I asked. Luca leaned one hip against a cabinet. We keep many things in this mansion. Some more legal than others. Dante stood near the far window, one hand in his pocket, lighter silent for once. Can you recover it? I moved toward the table before I answered. Burn pattern at the edges, water damage through the lower margin, iron gall ink bloom near the center. The page had been folded and unfolded in heat, mishandled afterward by at least 2 idiots. "Yes," I said automatically, "if no one touches it again." Tommaso, appearing with coffee from nowhere, looked offended. "I haven't touched anything. I'm on a very delicate anti-carb journey." Luca accepted a cup. "You ate 2 almond cookies an hour ago." Tommaso pointed at him. "Medical necessity." Stress control. Dante ignored both of them and watched me. I put on gloves. "I need a micro spatula, low suction, blotters, magnification, wheat starch paste, and Japanese tissue if there's edge loss after separation." Tommaso stared. "I don't know what any of that means, but suddenly I want to apologize to paper for existing." I almost smiled. For the next hour, the room narrowed to fiber, ink, damage, breath. I eased the fused corner apart millimeter by millimeter. Beneath the burn line, names emerged, dates, transfers, payments routed through charities that were not charities. Luca's smile vanished first. Then Dante's jaw hardened. "This is a trafficking ledger," I said quietly. The room went airless. At the bottom margin, written in a cramped hand different from the rest, was a single note: Saint Orsola intake transferred before fire. 1 female witness unaccounted. My fingers went numb. Tommaso set his coffee down very carefully. "Well," he said, "that seems bad." Bianca, who had drifted in silently at some point, swore in Italian. I looked at Dante. "You knew." His voice came flat. "Not enough. I should have let the page go. Instead, I found the tiny split at the center seam and reinforced it with tissue so fine it almost disappeared. My hand steadied when my thoughts did not. "What are you doing?" Luca asked. "Repairing the break," I said. "It's evidence. It's still paper." I pressed the tissue down, then looked at the repaired line when it caught the light. Visible if you knew where to look. Stronger for being mended honestly, not invisibly. "If you hide a tear completely," I murmured, half to myself, "it splits again somewhere meaner." No one answered for a second. Tommaso glanced at Dante. Dante did not move. But his gaze lowered to the repaired page, then to me, with an expression so unreadable it felt like standing near deep water at night. The phone on Luca's belt buzzed. He checked it, face tightening. "Gate security says 2 unmarked cars are sitting across the road." Bianca folded her arms. "Press." Dante took the phone, read the message, and went still in a different way than before. Focused. "Violent by implication." "Not press," he said. "Vittorio's men." I looked between them. "Who is Vittorio?" No one answered quickly enough. That was answer enough. Dante lifted his lighter and clicked it once. "Everyone out except Luca," he said. Tommaso groaned under his breath. Whenever he says it like that, somebody's evening gets ruined. Bianca touched my elbow on the way past. "Don't confuse being protected with being safe." Then she was gone. I turned back to Dante. "You keep telling me pieces, I want the whole thing." He looked at the charred ledger. "You'll get it." "When?" "When I know which part will kill you first." The house quieted around us. Not peaceful quiet, armed quiet, the kind that listens back. Outside, a car door slammed. Someone was already moving against us. The house had a chapel. That should not have surprised me. Men like Dante Salvator liked God nearby, even when they no longer expected forgiveness. I found it by accident at 1 in the morning, after sleep refused me again. The marble floors were cold under my bare feet, and every hallway looked expensive enough to judge me. At the end of the west corridor, a door stood half open. Candlelight moved across old wood. Inside, the chapel was small, private, no ornament wasted, 1 bank of red votives. A carved Madonna above the altar, her face worn smooth, where generations of frightened fingers had touched the wood. I stood just inside the doorway and listened to the flame noise of the candles. Then I heard the click. I turned. Dante stood in the hallway, shoulders filling the frame, silver lighter opening and closing once in his hand before he pocketed it. He looked less like a man who had come to pray than a man who had come to stand somewhere no one else was allowed to see him. "You walk quietly," he said. "I thought the same about you." He glanced at my bare feet on the stone. "You should have shoes on." I should have a lot of things. His gaze moved to the candle rack. 5 were already lit. For your sins, I asked. For other people's, he said. The answer should not have made my throat tighten. It did. I took one more step into the chapel, and the cold of the marble climbed into my bones. Do all your houses have private chapels, or only the ones with hidden ledgers and armed hallways? The armed hallways came first. A soft laugh escaped me before I could stop it. The sound startled both of us a little. Dante's expression did not change, but some fraction of the room's tension did. I moved to the nearest pew and touched the polished wood with my fingertips. My father used to light candles when he was trying to think. Did it help? No, I sat, but it gave his hands something to do while he lost arguments with God. Dante remained standing. Men like him probably did not know how to sit in rooms where they were not in command. I looked at the votives again. Was Saint Orsola yours? The silence after the question had shape. It was supposed to be safe, he said finally. Supposed to be is not the same thing. No, I heard the strain under that one syllable. Not confession, not yet, but pressure. Who was there? I asked. Besides me. His jaw tightened once. Children, 2 nuns, a driver, 1 guard. And, he stared at the altar. And a file crossed my desk saying the location had been compromised. My breath stalled. You sent them out. I sent a cleanup team. His voice had gone very flat. They arrived after the fire. The air in the chapel changed. I felt it like weather. Who wrote the file? I'm finding out. I stood because if I stayed seated, I might say something uncareful. You mean Vittorio? His eyes shifted to me. I mean I'm finding out. That's not denial. No, for a moment neither of us moved. This was one of those terrible, suspended seconds I had begun to recognize around him. The almost. The thing that could become tenderness or violence or neither if one breath went wrong. My hand rested on the back of the pew, his on the edge of the nearest candle stand. Not touching, near enough that I noticed how large his hands were and hated myself for noticing. You shouldn't be here alone, he said quietly. In the chapel, in this wing, I frowned. You think Vittorio's men are inside the house? I think men who fail once tend to get ambitious. Comforting. I wasn't trying to comfort you. No, I said. You're only accidentally good at it. Something moved in his face. Small, gone before I could name it. Footsteps hurried down the hallway. Tommaso appeared at the door, stopped dead when he saw us, and pinched the bridge of his nose like a man interrupted by destiny at a bad time. Excellent. Nothing says stable employment like finding my boss in a chapel at 1 a.m. with the woman he kidnapped. Dante did not look at him. I didn't kidnap her. Tommaso looked at me. Did he put you in a car against your will? Yes, Tommaso spread his hands. See, in Italy we call this kidnapping with upholstery. Despite everything, I laughed. Tommaso brightened. Ah. There it is, human sound. I knew we could bring it back. What do you need? Dante asked. Gate report, Tommaso said, turning serious. Black sedan finally moved. But one of the outer cameras looped for 28 seconds. Dante went motionless. That awful, meaningful stillness. Who had access? Me, Luca, 2 techs, and Tommaso's mouth tightened. Vittorio's audit team 3 weeks ago. I felt the cold marble harder now. Dante looked at me once, then at Tommaso. Double the west corridor. No one opens interior doors without my say. Tommaso nodded, then sniffed faintly. Also, Teresa says if anyone bleeds on her floors tonight, she'll resign and let us all starve. I believe her, I said. She's terrifying, he agreed. In a nurturing way. After he left, the chapel felt smaller. Dante stepped back from the altar. Go to your room. You say that like it's safe there. It is if I say it is. I should have told him no. Instead I said, that's an impossible thing to believe about you. His gaze settled on me. Believe it anyway. Then the lights in the hallway cut out. The chapel dropped into candle shadow. Instinct drove me backward. My heels slipped on the marble edge. Before I could hit the floor, Dante crossed the space between us and caught me, one arm at my waist. One hand braced around my wrist. It was the first time he had held me like that. Not accidental. Not passing, full contact, Heat through thin cotton. The force of him controlled down to the inch. I stopped breathing, so did he. In the dark, the red votive flames painted one side of his face and left the other in shadow. I could feel the tension in his hand where it circled my wrist. Not desire exactly. Restraint. Something harsher and more careful. "Stand up," he said softly. "I am standing." His eyes flicked once to my mouth and away so fast I almost thought I imagined it. That was the second almost. A shout broke down the corridor, then another. Men running. Dante released me first. Of course he did. He stepped between me and the door, drew a gun from the back of his waistband, and the room turned from chapel to battlefield in one elegant, horrifying movement. "Behind the altar," he said. "Dante, now," this time I obeyed. He moved into the hallway without another word, and I heard two muffled shots, a body striking wood and Tommaso yelling. I knew this was a bad night to skip pasta. Then silence, deep, total. Waiting, Dante reappeared at the chapel door, gun still low at his side, black shirt cut open at the shoulder where a bullet had grazed him. Blood darkened the fabric. My body chose before my fear did. I crossed the room, caught his wrist, and pulled him back inside. He looked down at my hand on him. "What are you doing, little witness?" "Saving Teresa's floors." Then I tore the altar linen into strips and pressed them to his shoulder. He hissed once through his teeth, but did not pull away. Under my hands, he was solid and burning. For one impossible second, the gentlest thing in that whole violent house was the way he let me touch him. "Serafina," he said, my name, not the nickname. It landed lower than the wound. Outside, men shouted orders. Inside, I tied the cloth tight and tried not to notice that his pulse had slowed under my fingers to match mine. Something changed there. Neither of us said it. By morning, the house smelled like bleach, espresso, and the sharp medicinal bite of Bianca's disinfectant. The intruder had made it only as far as the west corridor before Dante put him down. Nobody told me that directly, of course. In houses like his, truth arrived from the edges. Blood scrubbed from baseboards, one less guard at breakfast, Tommaso muttering about ammunition while pretending to complain about egg whites. I found Teresa in the conservatory just after noon, cutting rosemary from terracotta pots lined beneath the windows. "You should rest," she said without turning. "You sound like Bianca. She sounds sensible." Sunlight spilled through the glass roof and warmed the stone under my shoes. The room was full of herbs, lemon trees, and white orchids so pristine they looked expensive enough to have feelings. It was the first room in the house that felt lived in instead of guarded. Teresa handed me a pair of shears. Cut above the node, not below, only amateurs butcher basil. I accepted them. "Are you recruiting me or testing me?" "Yes," I surprised her by doing it correctly. Her brows lifted. "Who taught you?" "My mother cooked by instinct and my father cooked by apology. I learned from both." "That explains your hands." I looked at her. "What does that mean?" "You touch things like they matter." The words hit strangely deep. I bent back over the rosemary before she could see it. We worked in quiet for a few minutes. The kind that settles instead of presses. Then Teresa said, "You were at Saint Orsola." I froze with the shears halfway through a stem. She still did not look at me. I wasn't there. But I knew the sisters who survived it in rumors. Good women, wrong city. I swallowed. Everyone says that after. After is where truth gets dressed up. She finally turned. Before is where it's honest. I set the shears down. "You believe me. Dante brought you here himself." Teresa gave a tiny shrug. "He does not do that for liars." I almost laughed. That is an alarming standard for credibility. It works. The glass door opened behind us. Dante entered with Luca at his shoulder, both mid-conversation. Luca stopped when he saw me and smiled with such practiced warmth it might have been genuine, which made it more dangerous. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to interrupt the botany tribunal." Teresa sniffed. "Then speak less." Luca put a hand over his heart. "This house wounds me daily." Dante's gaze found the rosemary in my hands, then the herbs already bundled on the table. "You cook, apparently that's the new scandal." A quieter man would have let it go. Dante, unfortunately, looked interested. Teresa rescued me. She's helping. You are not taking my rosemary for war. I need the conservatory, Dante said. For what? He slid a cream folder onto the stone table. I saw my own name typed across the tab. Something inside me recoiled. I don't want another file, I said. This one is yours to open. I did not touch it. The sunlight suddenly felt too bright. What is it? Your intake packet from Saint Orsola, Dante said. Recovered from a church archive in Cicero this morning. My mouth went dry. How? Luca answered before Dante could. A donation trail. Fake charities, old burial accounts, 2 shell entities, 1 priest with a gambling problem. Very glamorous work. I ignored him. Why would they move it? Because it named the man who signed your transfer, Dante said. I looked at the folder until the paper blurred. Teresa laid one hand over mine, brief and warm. Open it here, so I did. The first page was brittle with age, bearing my birth name in slanted black type. Under it, a clipped photograph of a little girl with solemn eyes and a burn scar hidden under one sleeve. Intake notes, behavioral notation, witness judicial homicide, protective relocation advised. Then the assessment page. Subject exhibits persistent memory under pressure, repeats details even when contradicted, does not alter account to please examiner. Under evaluation remarks, a handwritten note, unusually resistant to suggestion. The room tilted. My father's face flashed in pieces, the knot of his tie, the warm scratch of his jaw when he kissed my forehead, his hand over mine on a courthouse staircase. Then blood on marble. Then smoke. I shut the file too fast. He tried to erase me because I remembered him correctly, I whispered. No one answered. I hated that they didn't have to. Dante stepped closer, not touching me. Near enough that I felt the cold from outside still clinging to him. There's more. I don't want more. You need it. Anger flared because grief needed somewhere to stand. You don't get to decide that. No, he said evenly, but I get to decide whether you face it alone. The almost there was not physical. It was worse. I opened the folder again. Attached to the back page was a transfer authorization signed V. Salveter and countersigned by a judge I recognized instantly. My father. No, not his signature. A forgery. I knew because my father made his capital G with a downward hook and this one curved clean. It's fake, I said immediately. Luca leaned in. You're sure? Yes. My voice steadied with certainty. He lifted the spacing but not the pressure. My father always cut deeper into the left side of the stroke when he was tired. Dante's gaze sharpened. You can prove it. If I have comparison samples, yes. Luca looked impressed despite himself. That is not a normal talent. It's not a talent. I touched the forged signature with one finger. It's what happens when a child watches paperwork kill people. The words dropped heavy into the room. Teresa quietly moved to the far counter and began crushing rosemary with sea salt and orange peel in a stone mortar, giving me privacy by pretending not to. The scent rose clean and bitter at once. Maybe that was why, 10 minutes later, I found myself in the kitchen making orange rosemary olive oil cake from memory while Teresa watched without interrupting. I needed my hands occupied. Needed order, ingredients measured, heat predictable. Tommaso wandered in halfway through and stared at the batter bowl like it had arrived from heaven personally. I'm on a disciplined nutritional protocol, he told no one. But if a slice accidentally falls onto my plate, who am I to insult Providence? It's not done, Teresa said. He sighed. Story of my life, neither is my love. When I asked who, Teresa smirked without looking up from the oranges she was zesting. Tommaso blushed to the ears. Don't encourage him, she said. It's too late, he said sadly. I have a face built for heartbreak. The cake emerged an hour later, dark gold at the edges, fragrant with citrus and crushed herb. I glazed it thinly so the top shone but didn't hide the cracks. Dante came in as Teresa set plates down. He stopped at the threshold. What is that? Evidence, Tommaso said, already reaching. I cut Dante a slice before I could overthink it and held it out. It's just cake. He took the plate from my hand. His fingers brushed mine, Warm, brief, unhelpful. He tasted it standing up. Then looked at me, the room waited. Bitter first, he said. Orange peel, I answered, and after, something softer if you're patient. Tommaso put his fork down dramatically. If none of you minds, I'd like to survive this kitchen with my emotions intact. Dante ignored him. It tastes like you don't trust sweetness unless it earns its way in. I had not meant the cake to confess for me, but it had. Outside, somewhere beyond the conservatory glass, a car rolled slowly past the gate. Lucas saw it too. He turned away too quickly. I noticed. I did not yet know why that mattered. The ambush came disguised as mercy. Dante agreed to let me leave the estate for 1 hour under escort to compare my father's old court signatures against archived land records at the Cook County Annex. Bianca thought the outing would help. Teresa packed me almonds and a scarf I did not need. Tommaso spent 10 full minutes complaining that protective driving on an empty stomach violated several human rights conventions. Eat the almonds, Teresa told him. I need protein, not woodland snacks. You need discipline. I need love, he corrected mournfully, adjusting his jacket. And perhaps one illegal pastry. Dante came down the front steps as we were loading into the armored SUV. He had not slept much, I could tell from the stillness. With him, fatigue made him quieter, not softer. He stood by the open rear door and looked at the scarf in my hand. Wear it, he said. It's 60 degrees. Wear it anyway, I should have argued. Instead, I wrapped it once around my throat and slid into the back seat. He watched until I did. That was the third almost. Not touch, not kiss, just obedience that felt too intimate to be safe. He closed the door himself. At the annex, the records clerk nearly fainted when Tommaso flashed credentials vague enough to frighten and useless enough to be legal. I spent 40 minutes bent over old deeds and judicial filings beneath bad fluorescent light, while Tommaso prowled the aisles complaining quietly into his earpiece. Why does every government building smell like wet despair? He muttered. And toner, mostly toner. I smiled despite myself. The forged signature matched exactly where it should have varied. Same spacing, wrong pressure, manufactured by someone who had samples but not instinct. I photographed everything. When we left, snow had started in thin, dry needles, though the forecast had promised clear skies. Chicago lied like a professional. Tommaso ushered me toward the SUV, hand hovering respectfully at my elbow. Then his head snapped up. Down! The shot hit the windshield where my face had been half a second earlier. Tommaso drove me to the pavement so hard my palms burned. Glass exploded inward. Men shouted. A second vehicle screamed out of the side street. I heard Dante before I saw him. A black sedan cut across traffic, braked sideways, and he was out of it already, gun in hand, coat flaring behind him like some old liturgy of violence. He had followed us. Of course he had. Bullets cracked under the concrete rail of the underpass. Tommaso was on one knee behind the SUV, returning fire and swearing about his ruined suit. I crawled toward the rear axle because somebody had once taught me that engines stopped some things and not others. A pair of shoes appeared on the far side of the car. Not Tommaso. Wrong leather. I froze, the man crouched, reaching. Before he touched me, Dante rounded the hood and shot him once through the throat. Efficient, close, nothing theatrical. The man folded without a sound. I had seen violence before, but not like that, not clean enough to erase the argument that it had been necessary. Dante dropped beside me. Are you hit? I shook my head, I think. His hand caught the back of my neck, checking, grounding, claiming space without asking. Look at me. I did. His eyes moved over my face, my coat, my hands, searching for blood that would change him. The metallic click sounded absurdly in the chaos. His lighter. He had no cigarette. No reason. Just the motion once in his left hand while his right kept the gun trained outward. A reflex when the world narrowed to killing and fear. It calmed me. That frightened me more than the gunfire. Can you move? He asked. Yes. Good. When I say run, you run to the pillar and do not stop. Another burst of shots hit the SUV. Tommaso cursed. If anyone dents the engine block, I'm billing the dead. Dante leaned around the frame, fired twice, then looked back at me. Little witness. The nickname had changed. Not warm, not yet. But no longer cold either. It carried urgency now, fear with teeth in it. I swallowed. What? His gaze dropped to my hands. I realized then that even pressed against a filthy underpass floor, shaking hard enough to blur my vision, I had one hand clamped over the evidence envelope inside my coat. Protecting the signatures. Protecting the proof, not myself. Again, something flashed through his expression. Recognition, anger at himself, something deeper. That was when he understood it fully, not my innocence. Not my usefulness. The fact that under threat I still chose truth first. He looked away before the realization could show. Run, he said. I ran. At the pillar, time stopped making sense. Tires screamed. Someone grabbed my coat and I drove Teresa's metal thermos from my bag backward into his face on instinct. He staggered. I ran again. That stupid kitchen-weighted object saved me half a second and maybe my life. Then hands caught me from behind. I made a sound I had never heard from myself. Dante got there before the man could drag me fully back. He hit him once with the gun barrel, once with his shoulder, and then they went down together in a blur of black wool and concrete. The attacker reached for a knife. Dante took the wrist, broke it, and drove him face first into the pillar hard enough to end the question. For 3 seconds, the whole world narrowed to Dante kneeling over a man and choosing whether to leave him alive. He did not shoot him. He stood, breathing once through his nose, and turned to me. There was blood at his temple. Someone else's, maybe. A cut splitting his lower lip, snow gathering in his hair. I had never seen anything more frightening. I had never felt safer. That truth hit so hard it almost knocked me down. Sirens sounded far off. Too far. Dante crossed the last distance and cupped my face with both hands like he was confirming I still existed. Serafina, I could not answer. His thumb stayed below my cheekbones. Careful. Reverent in a way he would probably rather die than name. He bent his forehead to mine for one impossible second. This was the fourth almost, and the most dangerous one yet. I should never have let you out of my sight, he said. I did not say the brave thing. I said the true one. Don't let go yet. His eyes closed once. When he opened them, something had shifted past denial. He knew why her now, why me, because I had looked at my own ruin and still tried to save the page. He stepped back before either of us broke. War had arrived cleanly after that. The surviving shooter carried Vittorio's mark, and the dead man's phone held one message only: bring her breathing. If possible, as Dante read it, the cut in his lip opened again. Tommaso peered over his shoulder and muttered, "Well, that seems personally rude." Dante's voice came out quiet enough to terrify. "Get the cars." He looked at me once more, then at the city. And I understood that something in him had just gone feral, and the people who had tried to take me were about to learn the difference between power and wrath. Tommaso survived the underpass because Bianca had the hands of a saint and the temperament of a prosecutor. That was what Teresa said after 6 hours of surgery, 3 units of blood, and one shouted threat involving kitchen knives and any man who tried to die in her house without permission. I sat outside the medical wing with dried underpass, grit still in the seams of my coat, and watched dawn stain the lake the color of old steel. Every few minutes I heard it from the end of the corridor. Click, Dante's lighter. He had not come into the recovery room once. He had stood outside it like a verdict, taking calls, giving orders, sending men across the city with names and addresses and instructions that came out so quietly they sounded worse than rage. Nobody interrupted him unless they wanted to lose nerve endings. Bianca came out first, stripping off gloves. "He'll live." The breath I let out hurt. "He asked if the suit survived," she added dryly. A laugh broke out of me and turned into something dangerously close to crying. Bianca looked at my face for one silent beat too long. "Go wash your hands, Serafina." "Why?" "Because you've been holding them in fists for hours." I looked down. She was right. When I came back, Dante was alone at the window at the end of the hall. Black shirt, black slacks, a fresh bandage at his temple, No jacket, no tie. He looked less like a man than the clean outline of one cut from night and left standing in daylight by mistake. You should sleep, I said. He did not turn. Tommaso is alive. That isn't sleep. No, I moved to stand beside him. The lake spread below us, calm in the kind of way that had nothing to do with mercy. This is my fault, I said. His head turned then, slowly. No, if I hadn't needed those signatures, they would have come another way. You don't know that. I do. The certainty in him made me angry because I wanted somewhere to put what I felt, and he kept refusing to be weak enough to hold it. Tommaso got shot because of me. Dante's jaw tightened. Tommaso got shot because Vittorio wants leverage, and I'm leverage. You're a witness. The nickname would have been kinder. A long silence. Then, there's a car leaving in 30 minutes. I stared at him. What? He pulled an envelope from inside his shirt pocket and handed it to me. Inside were a passport, cash, and papers in the name of Sofia Bell. Florence. Temporary housing already arranged. Bianca's cousin listed as contact. My pulse turned strange. You're sending me away. I'm giving you a choice. That doesn't feel like a choice. It's the first real one you've had since you got here. I looked at the passport. New name, new country. New silence. You think I can disappear. I think Vittorio does not stop once he wants something. Dante's voice stayed level. I can keep you alive here. I cannot keep everyone else from bleeding for it. Tommaso, pale and stitched, asleep down the hall. Teresa praying angrily over coffee. Bianca not saying I told you so because she was too decent. The cost of being close to him had finally become visible enough to touch. That was the point, the true exit. The moment a woman like me was supposed to run back toward ordinary life and be grateful the door had opened. Dante took the passport from my hand, set it on the windowsill, and clicked his lighter once before holding the flame to the corner of a slip of paper beside it. My old storage unit receipt, with my apartment key code written across the back. The fire ate the numbers in seconds. I stared at him. What are you doing? Making sure no one can use your old place to bait you? My throat tightened. That was all I had. No, he said. It was all they left you. He snuffed the flame with his thumb and handed me the lighter. It was warm from his hand. Go if you want to, he said. I won't stop you. That hurt worse than force would have. At the station platform 30 minutes later, Bianca stood with me beneath weak fluorescent lights and the smell of diesel, snow, and stale pretzels. She carried a medical satchel. I carried the life of a woman who did not exist. This is the sane choice, she said. I know. Dante thinks so too. That surprises me. It shouldn't. He only looks selfish from a distance. The train hissed at the platform edge. People moved around us in coats and travel faces and private urgencies. A normal world. Or something close enough to impersonate one. I stepped toward the door, then stopped. A little girl on the bench across from us was coloring on the back of a legal notice with a broken blue crayon. Her mother folded the notice under to make it fit on the seat, one page tucked away, one line hidden. My heartbeat changed. St. Ursula intake transferred before fire. Read the page they kept folding under. I looked down at the passport in my hand. Sofia Bell, safe, blank, gone again. If I left, Dante would still go to war. Tommaso would still limp for me. Vittorio would still own the records that erased children by changing one name, one stroke, one page. The whole machine would keep moving. Smoothly, professionally. And I would spend the rest of my life being alive in a way that meant nothing. I can't do it, I whispered. Bianca's eyes closed once. Not surprise, recognition. You'll lose the easier future, she said. I think I already did. The train doors opened wider with a chime. I stood there with freedom breathing in front of me. Then I turned away. At the curb outside the station, I took Dante's lighter from my pocket, flicked it open with clumsy fingers, and held the flame to the fake passport. The photo blackened first, then the name. When Dante's car screeched to the curb and he got out, snow catching in his dark hair, I was already feeding the last corner of Sofia Bell to the fire. He stopped hard when he saw me. You left, he said. I had a very brief moral crisis about trains. His gaze dropped to the burning passport, then to my face. "This choice costs you," he said. "Yes, you understand what staying means now." I thought of Tommaso's blood on the underpass concrete, of my father's forged signature, of the children hidden in ledgers, of the part of me that had wanted a smaller life and could no longer pretend it fit. "Yes," I said. He came the last step toward me, not touching. "Then why are you here?" My voice shook anyway. "Because leaving would have made me someone I don't think I could respect." The station noise blurred. The snow, the cars, the city. Dante looked at me like the world had just become more dangerous and more bearable at the same time. "Little witness," he said. This time it sounded almost like grief. I handed him the dead lighter. "I'm staying," I said, and I walked back into the dark with open eyes. Staying did not turn me brave, it turned me precise. By afternoon, I had comparison charts spread across Dante's office floor. Every forged signature cross-marked against legitimate court records, donation trails, intake codes, and shipping manifests recovered from the charred ledger. Luca helped me build the chain in silence, kneeling across from me in shirt sleeves, his tablet glowing cold over both our hands. That should have comforted me. Instead, I noticed too many careful things. The way he never touched the original pages directly. The way he asked where Teresa kept the lockbox keys without looking at Dante when he did. The way his smile arrived a second after his eyes. The listener would have known before I did. That was the worst part. All the signs were there, lined up like bad stitching. Tommaso, drugged and furious in recovery, insisted on being wheeled in for morale and superior tactical charm. "For the record," he told Bianca as she parked him near the window, "I have been shot for less appreciative employers." "You've been dramatic for less appreciative employers," Bianca corrected. He pointed at Teresa, who had come in with broth. "If I die, tell her I always believed in full-fat dairy." Teresa rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might strain something. "If you die, it will be because you never shut up." He smiled dreamily. "There, see, chemistry." For 1 minute the room breathed. Then Dante entered and the air changed. He set a small envelope on the desk. "We found a storage lease under one of Vittorio's shell names, old printworks on the river." My skin prickled. "What's there?" "Documents, maybe." "Maybe a trap." "Then why tell me?" His gaze held mine. "Because some of the paper stock in the forged court orders matches a defunct municipal printer." "You're the one who noticed it." I looked down at the sample sheet in front of me, cotton rag content, deckled edge, watermark ghosting under angle light. He was right. "If Vittorio is using the old printworks," I said slowly, "he'd keep the original plates or pulp stock dry, below street level but above flood line." Luca looked up sharply. "You can tell that. It's paper," I said. "It hates basements." Tommaso muttered, "If I survive this family, I'm writing a memoir called Threat Assessment by Stationery." Dante's mouth almost moved. Almost. That night, while the house locked down around us, I made the worst mistake of the story. Luca found me in the records room with my notes. "Dante's moving too visibly," he said quietly. "If Vittorio thinks we're coming, he'll burn everything before dawn." I looked up. So if we verify the watermark source first, we can tell Dante which room to hit." He held out his phone. "Send me the plate number chart. I know one of the old city archivists, off books, faster than going through our channels." I should have waited. I should have made him ask in front of Dante. I should have trusted the cold, not in my ribs. Instead, I looked at Tommaso pale under morphine, at Dante burning through men and time, at the names of children turned into transactions, and I sent Luca the chart. He kissed the top of his thumb in thanks, absurdly old-fashioned. "You just saved us 6 hours." He left. 23 minutes later, the lights in the record's wing died, not the whole house. Just that corridor. My body knew before my mind did. I reached for the panic button beneath the desk. A gloved hand caught my wrist. The cloth over my mouth smelled sweet and chemical. I twisted, bit down, tasted fabric, heard a curse. Not enough. The room tilted. As I was dragged backward, I saw one thing through the opening door, Luca at the end of the hallway, looking straight at me. Not surprised, not afraid. just sorry in a thin, exhausted way that made everything worse. When I woke, my wrists were tied to the arms of a wooden chair with printer's cord. The room smelled of damp brick, old ink, and machine oil. A hanging bulb swung overhead, turning shadow into motion. River noise thudded beyond the walls. Old printworks. I pulled once against the bindings and felt the give of rough fiber. Not rope. Twisted cotton line, cheap, dry, abrasive, useful eventually. "Don't strain yet," said a male voice. "I want you lucid for this part." Vittorio Salvator stepped into the light. He was older than Dante by maybe 15 years, elegant in the stale way of men who think manners absolve appetite. Same dark eyes, same economy of movement, same stillness weaponized. But where Dante's restraint felt like structure, Vittorio's felt hollowed out. A beautiful room after the furniture had burned. "You have your father's mouth," he said. "Unfortunate, he used it badly." My stomach turned to ice. "You killed him." I corrected a procedural problem. I stared at him until disgust steadied me. "That is the ugliest sentence I've ever heard." He smiled faintly. "Dante would disagree. He has heard himself say worse." There it was, the mirror, not pure evil. The future Dante could have become if efficiency lost every last argument with mercy. On the table beside him lay the original Saint or Sola transfer ledger, open to my page. My breath caught. "You moved children like inventory," I whispered. "We moved liabilities before they became headlines." He tilted his head. "You see why you're difficult." The door opened behind him. Luca walked in. My chest hollowed out. He would not meet my eyes. "I'm sorry." "No," I said softly. "You are." That landed. I could tell because his face pinched once quickly. Vittorio laughed under his breath. "I told you she would notice precision." Luca set down a case of files. "The house is mobilizing." "As expected." Vittorio touched the ledger page. "The girl will authenticate the originals. Dante will come for her, and then we'll see whether blood makes him sentimental." I pulled once more on the cord, slower now, feeling where it scraped against the chair spindle. Significant mistake. Real consequence. Not instantly forgiven. I had given Luca the chart. I had opened the door. And now the cost of my error sat under a single bulb and wore my name on a ledger line. Vittorio leaned close enough for me to smell expensive soap over old tobacco. "Tell me something, Serafina." When everyone called you a liar, what hurt more, that they didn't believe you or that part of you eventually helped them? I said nothing. He smiled. "Good." Silence is hereditary. When he straightened, I noticed the watermark paper stacked behind him. Municipal stock, yes, but also one fresh batch from a specialty mill in Cicero. Teresa's supply invoices from the conservatory deliveries had included the same van company. A route, a drop warehouse, one detail, one chance. Outside, somewhere above the river noise, a car door slammed. Too late or not late enough. I couldn't tell. Vittorio closed the ledger gently. Then he picked up Dante's lighter from the table. My blood went cold. He flicked it once and the metallic click split the room. "He dropped this 20 years ago at St. Orsola," Vittorio said. "I kept it." Funny, the things men build themselves around. Dante had not merely failed there, he had been there, and he had carried the guilt ever since. The bulb swung harder overhead. The warehouse doors began to open. I did not wait to be rescued. That felt important, even tied to a chair in a room full of my own bad decisions. Vittorio and Luca had gone upstairs to meet incoming men. The guard left inside with me was broad, bored, and reading sports scores on his phone, as if human trafficking were a salaried inconvenience. The cotton line at my wrists had already begun to fray where I'd worked it slowly against the rough chair spindle. Printer's cord is made to hold tension, not teeth. I twisted my right wrist hard enough to lose skin, got 2 fingers free, then the thumb. Pain flared white. Good, useful. I bent forward, reached the table edge, and dragged the ledger toward me 1 inch at a time with my fingertips until the metal corner clip came loose. The clip was thin, sharp enough. By the time footsteps pounded overhead, I had my left wrist free and the chair tipped sideways. The guard looked up too late. I drove the metal clip into his throat. Not deep, not fatal. just enough to make him choke and grab instinctively. I took his gun, though my hand shook so badly it felt ridiculous, then ran with the ledger clutched to my chest like something holy and diseased. Up one iron stair, across a catwalk, past stacks of paper wrapped in plastic and damp river air. The upper floor opened into an old press room with rusted rollers and shattered windows. Men were shouting near the loading bay. Gunfire cracked outside. Someone screamed. Vittorio's voice carried once, calm even now. Then Dante's voice answered from somewhere below, low and lethal enough that the room seemed to bend around it. I ran the opposite direction, not away from him. Toward the side office overlooking the river, because I had seen the Cicero Mill watermark and the shipment stamps and the route notes. The real evidence would be where Vittorio kept what he needed fastest. Inside the office, file cabinets, a safe, 2 open shipping boxes, a desktop scanner, and 3 fresh municipal transfer orders waiting for signatures that would erase more children by morning. My hands moved before fear could slow them. Ledger in bag, new orders in bag, phone out, photos of everything, scan plate numbers, shipment manifests, donation routes. One embossed seal from Cook County Family Services. The door behind me opened. Luca. He raised his hand slightly when he saw the gun in mine. Serafina, don't. His face looked 10 years older than yesterday. You were never supposed to be here this long. That nearly made me laugh. You sold me. I bought time. For who? His throat worked. My sister. The answer landed uglier than a lie. She was in debt, he said quickly. Vittorio owned the clinic that kept her in treatment. I fed him roots, schedules, harmless pieces. I told myself it was compartmentalized. Then you happened. I held the gun harder. That's not better. I know. He looked at the ledger in my hand. Listen to me. Vittorio won't leave here with that. Dante won't leave without you. If they meet on the floor below before the west gate is cleared, half the men in this building die. Why are you telling me this? Because I liked you. A ruined half-smile. And because I'm finally tired of being exactly what they paid for. That was the problem with human betrayal. It was rarely clean enough to hate simply. Below us, Tommaso's voice roared faintly through the press room. If anyone shoots me in the other side, I'm retiring and becoming a florist. Alive. Relief nearly dropped me. Luca heard it too and almost laughed through blood at the corner of his mouth, where someone must have already hit him. He came shot and dramatic. Of course. He stepped toward the window, looked out once, then back at me. There's a river door at the north wall. Dante doesn't know it. Vittorio does. My pulse jumped. Why tell me? Because if Dante becomes Vittorio tonight, none of this meant anything. There, the mirror again. The thing the villain reflected and the traitor named. Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Luca opened the office safe, grabbed one black ledger from inside, and shoved it into my bag with the others. Go, left at the broken press. Down the steel stairs. Luca, don't forgive me. He met my eyes for the first time since the record's wing. Just go, I ran. At the broken press, a body blocked my path, one of Vittorio's men. I nearly screamed. Then the body moved and cursed about his shoulder in a voice so familiar I almost cried with relief. Tommaso, white as paper and furious in a blood-spotted bandage, pointed toward the river stairs. I took one sedative nap and the whole family loses its mind. You're supposed to be in bed. And miss this cardio? Never. He squinted at the bag in my hand. Please tell me that's evidence and not snacks, because I've risked a great deal for the wrong reasons before. I made a strangled sound that might have been laughter. Then Dante appeared at the far end of the catwalk. For 1 second, he didn't move. He saw the cut ropes at my wrists, the gun in my hand, the bag slung across my shoulder, Tommaso bleeding upright beside me. He saw that I had survived first. Then he crossed the distance. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe both of us. Maybe neither. I only know that he reached me and one arm went around my back hard enough to hurt and not nearly hard enough to be enough. My forehead hit his jaw. His hand spread at the base of my skull. Wordless, raw, desperate in the most silent possible way. That was the first reunion that felt like truth. He drew back just enough to look at me. "Are you hurt?" "Yes," I said, because honesty had become expensive and necessary, "but not where it matters." His eyes changed. He touched the frayed cord marks at my wrist with the side of his thumb. "Little witness." Warm now, not fully, but close enough that my chest ached. I shoved the bag at him. "Luca gave me the safe ledger. Vittorio has a river door. He'll run north." Tommaso lifted one finger weakly. "Also, if Teresa asks, I was magnificent." Dante took the bag without looking away from me. "Stay with Tommaso." "No, Serafina. I know the evidence. I know what matters." "We fight better if I'm useful." The refusal hit between us and stayed there. Then, brief as a blade reflecting light, Dante nodded. We moved together through the press room while gunfire echoed in the rafters. At the north wall, the river door stood open to black water and snow. Vittorio waited there with two men and Luca on his knees between them, blood bright on his shirt. Of course he had taken his payment in flesh. Vittorio smiled when he saw us. "There you are." Dante went very still. "One of us might not survive what came next. We all knew it." The river came in cold through the open door and licked at the edges of the room. Vittorio stood with one hand on Luca's shoulder, as if introducing a nephew at dinner, instead of holding a dying traitor upright. Two armed men flanked him. Beyond them, black water slapped pilings below the loading dock. Dante stopped 3 strides in front of me, not to block me from seeing, to place himself where every bullet would meet him first. That was his language, always had been. "Let him go," Dante said. Vittorio's smile thinned. "Which one?" Luca coughed blood onto the concrete. My bag of ledgers hung heavy against my shoulder. Inside it were names, routes, signatures, intake codes, payment channels. Whole lives flattened into transactional neatness. Dante felt their weight too. I could tell by the way his jaw shifted once and locked. "Take the books," Vittorio said. "Take the girl, walk out. We call the rest inheritance." "You forged Saint Orsola," Dante said. "No heat, no spectacle, the quiet before deliberate ruin." Vittorio tilted his head. "I corrected a weakness in the family. You used children. I used leverage." He actually believed the distinction mattered. That was what chilled me most. Not cruelty, bureaucratic cruelty. The version that wore cufflinks and called itself necessity. Dante took one more step. "You used me." At that, Vittorio's eyes changed almost tenderly. "No, Dante, I taught you. Paper moves men farther than bullets ever will. You learned beautifully. This empire exists because you finally understood that." There was the real wound laid bare, not just Saint Orsola. The years after, the ledgers, the structure, the ways Dante had chosen efficiency because grief made softness feel criminal. What Vittorio was, Dante had nearly become. I saw it on his face when he understood the full shape of it. Then I saw him refuse it. One of Vittorio's men shifted his aim toward me. I dropped first, slamming the evidence bag into Dante's leg as warning. He pivoted and fired before I hit the floor. Tommaso, somehow still vertical and somehow still sarcastic, shot the second man from behind a paper pallet and yelled. I would like everyone to remember I did this while medically discouraged. Gunfire tore the room apart. I crawled for the rusted press base as paper dust filled the air. Luca collapsed sideways, trying to drag himself clear. Vittorio moved for the river door. Dante moved faster. They met in the threshold, not a cinematic fight, no wasted flourishes. Brutal, close, ugly, bone and breath and old hatred with a family resemblance. I saw Vittorio slash with a blade. Dante took the hit across the ribs and kept moving. I saw Dante drive him back against the metal jamb hard enough to shake the door. I saw the moment Vittorio reached not for the knife again, but for the bag of ledgers at my side. Of course, he wanted the system more than his own blood. I snatched the bag away and ran toward the idle press furnace at the far wall. "Serafina," Dante barked. I had already understood what had to happen. The ledgers were evidence. They were also architecture. As long as they existed intact in Mafia hands, someone would rebuild the machine. Dante knew that. He had spent years maintaining versions of it. To defeat Vittorio cleanly was impossible. To defeat him permanently required fire and copies and loss. I ripped the black safe ledger open and yanked the crucial pages. The Saint Orsola transfers, the route lists, the judge payments, the charity codes. I shoved those into my coat, then hurled the remaining bound books into the furnace chute. For 1/6 second, nothing happened. Then the paper caught. Flame climbed fast through dry pages and old glue. Vittorio made a sound then, not fear, bereavement. "You stupid girl, read the page they kept folding under," I shouted, and threw the forged transfer plates in after it. Dante heard me, so did Vittorio. Something savage and bright crossed Dante's face. Vittorio lunged toward me. Luca, bleeding out on the concrete, caught Vittorio's ankle with both hands. It was not redemption, not enough for that. But it cost him the last of his strength, and it bought Dante one clean opening. Dante shot Vittorio once through the chest. The room fell silent except for the furnace roar and the river slapping outside. Vittorio looked down at the blood on his shirt like a man insulted by accounting, then at Dante. "This was always you," he whispered. Dante's answer came low and final. "Not anymore." Vittorio died on his feet for half a second before gravity corrected him. After that, everything moved too fast and too slow at once. Tommaso sat down abruptly on a crate and said, with offended dignity, "I would now like immediate pasta and moderate applause." Bianca arrived with the second wave and swore at the sight of him. Teresa came behind her despite every order not to and went straight to Teresa first, touching his face with both hands before she remembered to look angry about it. That nearly undid me. Luca was still breathing when I reached him. He looked at the furnace, then at the pages stuffed inside my coat. "Copies?" he asked. "Yes, good." Blood touched the corner of his mouth when he tried to smile. For what it's worth, I hated him before I feared him. I know, it was the only mercy left that was true. He died before Bianca reached us. Dante stood a few feet away, one hand pressed to his ribs, blood slipping between his fingers, watching the ledgers burn. Not triumphant, not relieved, just changed. I went to him. He looked down at the soot on my face, the rope burns on my wrists, the stolen pages under my coat. His hand lifted once, hesitated, a restraint older than tonight, then came to rest against my cheek. "You burned my empire," he said. I swallowed. "Only the part that deserved to die." His mouth moved once, almost a smile, almost grief. Then he looked past me at Vittorio's body, at Luca's, at the furnace. "What I built with those books," he said quietly, "doesn't survive this. Maybe that's the point." A beat, the longest one, then he nodded. Outside, sirens approached. Real ones this time, federal. Anonymous tips had gone out from Luca's phone, and 3 burner lines Tommaso swore he had, for civic emergencies and emotionally charged traffic disputes. Dante pressed his bloodied hand harder to his side and looked at the black river beyond the door. He was not the same man who had opened my file in the archive room. Neither was I. The furnace devoured the last intact ledger. The river wind shifted. And at last, with smoke in the rafters and truth in my coat, I heard myself say the only words the night had left. "It is over. War does not end cleanly. It settles into paperwork, funerals, press statements, frozen accounts, empty chairs at breakfast, and the strange humiliation of ordinary sunlight continuing to arrive as if it had not seen anything." 3 months later, the Salvetter estate was quieter in a way that felt earned rather than haunted. Tommaso still limped when he was tired and milked it shamelessly. "I nearly died," he informed anyone passing through the kitchen. "I should never again be denied butter." Teresa set a bowl of minestrone in front of him. "You were denied because you lied to Bianca about your physical therapy." He tasted it, went briefly reverent, and then tried to recover his pride. "This is blackmail by legumes." She hid her smile in the ladle. That subplot, absurdly, mattered to me more than I would have expected. Maybe because, in a house that had survived on blood and secrecy, watching 2 impossible people circle each other through soup felt like evidence that not everything human had to become tragedy to be real. Bianca had moved 2 of her trauma patients into the renovated guest wing and converted Dante's unused East office into a legal clinic satellite for Saint Orsola survivors. Teresa supervised meals. Tommaso supervised security and complained that charity work had terrible catering standards unless I interfere personally. I spent most of my days in the restored records room with temperature controls humming softly around me, reassembling what could still be saved from the Saint Orsola files. Burned edges, washed ink, amended names, children who had been told one version of themselves and deserved another. Sometimes the work made my hands shake, sometimes it steadied them. Dante gave testimony in exactly the way he lived, economical, devastating, leaving no space for argument. He surrendered shell ledgers, names, fronts, transit routes, judges, accountants. Enough to break Vittorio's network and wound his own. Men left. Men tested the edges. Some stayed because they believed in Dante, some because they feared the vacuum more. He accepted all of it without theatrics. The cost had been real, business lost, blood spilled, a version of power gone forever. I loved him most on the days it sat badly on him. Not because suffering is romantic, because honesty is. One rainy evening in October, I found him in the conservatory, standing under the lemon trees Teresa had threatened to murder anyone for overwatering. He held a folder in one hand and his lighter in the other, turning it once, not clicking it. I leaned against the doorframe. Should I be worried when you hold paper and fire at the same time? Yes, he said. Generally. The rain ticked against the glass roof. The rosemary had grown back thicker since spring. Teresa said plants liked being respected and pruned with confidence. I suspected people did too. What's in the folder? I asked. Property deed transfers, Saint Orsola Land Trust. Bianca's clinic charter. He looked at me, and one other thing. I took a step closer. That sounds ominous. It's inconvenient. Different word for ominous. He actually almost smiled. There were still almosts between us, even now. They had changed texture. Less hunger held back by fear, more tenderness held back by awe. Our first real kiss had happened a month after the printworks in the dark of the records room, when I'd reached up to fix the bandage at his ribs, and he had asked, "Are you sure?" like the question could wound him. I had not said I want you. I had said, with my whole heart trying to break itself open, if you stop now, I think I'll feel it for days. So he hadn't stopped. Nothing about us had been careless after that. He set the folder aside on the potting bench. Come here. I did. Rainlight silvered the glass around us. He reached up and tucked one escaped strand of hair behind my ear, fingers lingering once at my jaw. Warm, familiar, still enough to matter. Little witness, he said. The nickname had finished changing. It no longer sounded like possession or warning. It sounded like home with a shadow behind it. Yes, he drew a breath. Dante Salvator, who had faced federal prosecutors, buried his uncle, and dismantled his own criminal architecture without visible panic. Looked for 1 second, like a man stepping barefoot across broken ground. I built my life around control, he said. Then you walked into an archive room and asked me to read what everyone else hid. My throat tightened. He took a small velvet box from his pocket, stared at it as if mildly offended by its existence, then looked back at me instead of kneeling. That mattered. He was not lowering himself for romance. He was standing in the full weight of who he was and asking anyway. I don't know how to offer you anything untouched, he said. I don't have that kind of life. I have this house, this city. My name with all its damage. I have mornings I would rather spend badly with you than nights spent well without you. I laughed through tears I hadn't agreed to. His thumb brushed one from under my eye. If you say no, I will still build the clinic. I will still protect the files. I will still... Dante. He stopped. Yes, I whispered, because anything longer would have broken in my mouth. Yes. Something in his face gave way then. Not control, loneliness. He opened the box. The ring was old, oval-cut, surrounded by tiny dark diamonds that made the center stone look like light held against night. It was my mother S., he said. She had terrible judgment in men and excellent judgment in stones. I laughed again, more helplessly. He slid the ring onto my finger with hands steadier than mine. Then, because I could not bear all that gravity unanswered, I touched the seam of his shirt over his heart and said, "Your proposal was very threatening. It was concise. It implied emotional devastation. Accurate," rain went on against the glass. Somewhere in the kitchen, Tommaso yelped as Teresa ordered him away from cooling pastry. Ordinary sounds, radical ones. Dante bent and kissed my forehead first. The tenderness of it nearly destroyed me. When he pulled back, he rested his brow lightly to mine and murmured, "Stay." Not command, not fear, just truth. "I already did," I said. And in the kitchen below us, Tommaso shouted, "Teresa Amato, if this is your idea of foreplay, the whole house is listening." Her thrown spoon hit the wall. The life after war did not look soft. It looked real. 9 months later, the St. Orsola Records Center opened on a gray spring morning with fresh paint, reinforced shelving, climate control. And a brass plaque so modest Teresa called it suspiciously tasteful. The building used to be a parish annex. Bianca had turned the back rooms into counseling offices. The front archive held restored intake ledgers, court petitions, baptismal records, foster transfers, and all the quiet paperwork that decided whether a person could ever prove where they had come from. I stood at the main table with a stack of new accession sheets and tried not to look at the crowd gathering by the windows. Children grown into adults. Adults softened back into sons and daughters. Reporters outside the rope line. 2 federal marshals. Teresa in deep green, pretending not to be emotional. Tommaso beside her in a tailored navy suit, pretending not to be emotional and failing harder. I'm only crying because Bianca banned celebratory cannoli until after the speeches. He whispered to no one. Teresa slipped her hand into his for exactly 3 seconds, and the man nearly met God on sight. Dante arrived last, because of course he did, and the whole room altered around it. Not from fear the way it used to, from attention. He wore charcoal instead of black, not softer, just less armored. The scar at his ribs pulled slightly when he moved. I knew because I knew where the scar lay under his shirt, and because loving someone teaches your eyes improper things. He came to the table while Bianca handled the first wave of donors and survivors. In his hand, the silver lighter. He set it beside my accession sheets without a word. I looked up. Smoking in an archive is a felony and a personal insult. I'm aware. Then why bring it? His gaze dropped to the papers in front of me. One page had curled at the corner under the damp spring air from the open door. Automatically, without thinking, I reached to smooth it flat and align it with the stack before I did anything else. His eyes stayed on my hand. There it was again. The bookend, not my face, not the ring on my finger, not the life we had built in the wreckage. That. The small, infuriating thing that had changed everything. The way I protected the truth before I protected myself. The way even now, in peace, my fingers straightened what other people might miss. Dante picked up the page, turned it, and said quietly, "Read the page they kept folding under." My breath caught. He remembered every word. "I remember who I was when I said it," I answered. "And who you are now." I looked around the room. At Teresa pretending not to watch me. At Tommaso being handed one contraband cannolo by Bianca with the solemnity of a religious sacrament. At the shelves of restored names. At the windows letting in ordinary weather. At the man in front of me who had once looked at my file and frozen. "Someone who stayed," I said. He clicked the lighter once. Same metallic note as the archive room, same exact sound, only now it was not a lock. He lit the memorial candle by the plaque instead. The flame caught cleanly. Same gesture, different world. I felt tears rise and did not fight them. Innocence had survived me, though not untouched. Maybe that was all adulthood was, remaining recognizably yourself after reality had done its worst. Dante looked at the candle, then at me. In the old days, he would have hidden what came next behind silence. Now he said it. "Do you know why it was you?" The room blurred softly at the edges. "I think so," I whispered. No, his thumb brushed the inside of my wrist where the rope scars had faded to pale ghosts. You were terrified, outnumbered, called a liar by men with power. And you still straightened the page first. You still asked for truth before mercy. His voice roughened slightly, barely. I had built a life with men who saved themselves before anything clean. Then you walked in and kept doing the one thing I didn't know how to deserve. The world narrowed to his hand, the candle flame, the softened paper edge under my fingertips. That cost you? I asked. Yes, how? He looked at the memorial plaque, at Saint Ursula carved in brass, at the names no longer hidden. It meant I could never pretend I didn't know better after you. There are love declarations that sound beautiful. There are love declarations that sound expensive. That one was both. I touched his jaw, little dramatic for a man who claims to be concise. You make me inefficient. Good. He bent and kissed me then, not with urgency, with settlement. With warmth earned the long way around. When he pulled back, his forehead rested lightly to mine in full view of everyone, and nobody in the room pretended not to feel the gravity of it. From the corner, Tommaso sniffed loudly. If anyone needs me, I'm overwhelmed and very handsome. Teresa gave him a second cantaloupe. That was love too. Later, after the speeches and signatures and cameras and quiet reunions over old paper, the building emptied. Evening laid gold across the records room. I was filing the last accession sheet when Dante returned from locking the front door. I heard the deadbolt, then his steps, then the lighter, once idly in his hand. I did not turn right away. Instead, I aligned the final stack, pressing the dog-eared corner smooth. His silence deepened behind me. When I faced him, he was watching my hands with that same expression from the first day, only now it held no suspicion, no violence waiting behind it, only recognition, wonder sharpened by history. You're doing it again, he murmured. Yes. He came closer, slow enough to let me stop him. I didn't. His fingers closed gently around mine over the page. Little witness. Warm, entirely warm. I smiled through the ache that still lived under joy. Some wounds become structure. Some never leave. Loving him had not erased what he had been or what I had survived. It had simply made ordinary tenderness feel like the most radical choice either of us had ever made. Outside, the city went on being itself, imperfect, armed in hidden places, not safely transformed by one good decision. Inside, a candle burned beside a plaque. A file lay open under honest light, and the man who had once terrified me stood with his hand over mine, as if this small piece required guarding too. Maybe it did. He lowered his mouth to my temple and spoke so softly the words felt placed there, not heard. Home, he said. That was the last door closing. Some losses do not stop aching just because love survives them. Dante built a cleaner world than the one he inherited, but he will never get back the years he gave to ledgers before he chose people over power. Would you have chosen Dante and accepted the blood already on his hands if it meant Saint Ursula's children finally got their names back?